hope everybody is having a fantastic day across the world, really. We've had a lot of participation from different countries. I'm in Texas where it is colder than we are used to, and we are not good at driving in the ice. So it's been a fun couple of days as everybody panics and heads to the grocery store for 2 days for 2 days
For
of
bread
weather.
milk.
But that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in Texas right now. All right. I think everybody is filing in. We have a much higher number now. So I want to say welcome to our panel today. We are talking about the romance formula, more specifically, the crisis moment and whether or not it is overrated. My name is Melissa Brayden, and I'm the moderator today. So I will be steering the ship a little bit. And I'm here with all of my friends. These are all friends of mine. So this is a great panel to be sitting in on for me, especially. But I would love to encourage your participation. I say that to our audience today. And there's a chat bar. Usually, I think it takes a minute or two to come on board, but it should come on board shortly if it's not there now. Just pay attention to who you're sending a message to. Sometimes I think I'm talking to everyone, and then I realize I just sent that to the panelists only. So if you want everyone to see your message, turn it to everyone. And if it's not on yet, it should be on shortly. But in addition to that, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And so I have some questions for our panelists that I will be going through today, but I encourage your questions as well because we want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to add your questions as we go along. First of all, before we jump in, I want to introduce, or rather, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves because I think that's a little more casual and fun. And sometimes I learn interesting things that I did not know about them. And I'm going to ask Krystina Rivers to begin and then tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Krystina Rivers. I'm an author of contemporary sapphic romance with bold strokes. My third book, An Atlas to Forever, came out back in November. It may also be known as An Atlas to Love. I'm not really sure. It goes both ways. Um, my fourth book is in editing right now, comes out in August, and I am busily away on number 5, which is insane for me since I started writing during the pandemic, and now pandemic isn't over, but we're kind of back to real life. So I'm trying to shoehorn all this writing thing in. I live in Chicago, where we are currently trying to deal with, I don't know, -30 wind chills. I'm mostly spent my morning trying to convince my dogs that with 2 layers of coats, they will go outside and go to the bathroom so that one does not give herself a UTI. So it's very, very exciting here.
That's great.
Happy to be here. Really excited for this.
I have to tell you that book you just held up, that is your current release. It saved a plot point for me. I heard you talking about the premise on another panel, and something clicked, and you saved me, and I'll tell you about that another time. But yeah, pretty cool. Go book.
Excited to hear that.
All right, next I'm going to move to Kris Bryant. Say hello to the people.
Hello, I'm Kris Bryant. I too write contemporary romance. I too am struggling with the really cold weather. And what's bad is I have to take Molly out in this weather at least like once an hour. She is an older dog. She is crippled, so I am in her legs. And I don't have the right kind of clothing here for this kind of weather. So I try to make her go as quickly as possible. So what else? I don't have much else to say. I mean, I love animals. I love all of you. I love that we're doing this this bookathon this month. And I love all the panels.
I think you've covered it. It's rough out there weather-wise. We're all struggling, I think. And our dogs factor in because we got to get them outside as well. I'm going to move next to my friend Aurora.
I'm Aurora Rey. I write contemporary romance, and I have little dogs who are just pooping in the house.
It was over it.
I am deeply grateful for my concrete floors in my house, as much as I don't like them always. Yeah, I think I'm working on book number like 18 or 19 now.
Wow.
It's weird to lose track, but like I actually have lost track, which is fun. I work at a college. I've recently become a life and writing and creativity coach. I've also decided to start selling baguettes out of a little room in my house. So
oh my gosh.
I am now apparently just addicted to side hustles and need to find a way to quit my day job so I can just do them all. And I'm so excited to be here.
I don't know how you do all that. If you're out there and you think your life is busy, you just think of Aurora Rey and you suck it up, okay? You got to do better.
Yeah, but I don't have babies, so that makes a big difference.
That's true. That's true. That's true. All right, moving on to Allie Valley. Allie, would you introduce yourself?
Hey, I am Allie Valley. I'm in Louisiana where it is unseasonably cool. We're getting ready to have a big cold front drop. So I've been out covering faucets. Not prepared for such things. But I have actually been with Bold Strokes for 20 years. We had our big
Nice.
panel yesterday, so it was our 20-year anniversary. I think in that 20 years, I'm closing in on number 40, book 40.
Oh my
So I started with The Devil, and actually later on this year, I think it's the 8th book in the series will come out. So hopefully everyone will enjoy that. But still writing, still enjoying it, and enjoying all the friendships that I've made in those 20 years. Wow. Like you said, and all this panel.
Yes, it's great.
Friends. Yeah.
It's just like we're all hanging out together today, which is fun. And I'm going to move on to Ursula Klein next. Ursula, will you introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, I'm Ursula Klein, and my second book is just come out actually. Winter Spell, yay! My first book was Enchanted Autumn, and so yes, I'm writing romance, but I'm also writing romance infused with fantasy, witches, spells. The second book has a mermaid in it. So I enjoy kind of mixing those two genres. It's what I like to read, it's what I like to write. Aside from that, like Aurora, I also work in higher education, which is an interesting time right now to be doing. Aside from that, I love to travel. I love to crochet. I have a 3.5-year-old son, and I'm expecting baby number 2 in just a month. So really excited that the bookathon is in January and not February.
There you go. There you go. It's coming. It'll be here before you know it. It's exciting time for sure. All right. Next, I'm going to move to Nan. Nan and I hung out together already today. We've just been having the best time, and we are reunited on this panel, but we might have a new audience. So Nan, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm excited to have a double dose of Melissa
It's a
in my day.
double. We're hanging out.
I'm Nan Campbell, and I have been with Bold Strokes Books for a couple of years now. My third book just came out in December called Like They Do in the Movies. I write contemporary romance, and I'm in New York City, and I feel like I have to add to the weather chat. And we had 10 minutes of horizontal rain/snow, which I watched from the window, and it's now over. So there we go. Weather report from New York City.
We got it. We got it. We're checking all the boxes here. Well, I want to welcome all of the panelists, first of all, and thank you for your introductions. When we were given our topics, and I realized I was the moderator of this particular topic, I racked my brain of how can we approach this as a group, because it's almost like they've given us a hypothesis here, like, is the crisis moment overrated? So I thought, you know what, let us define crisis moment, because that's a beat that we work with as writers on a daily basis, but maybe not every reader knows that term. And so we'll knock that out. And then I think we can just kind of discuss it and see what conclusions we come to. Is it overrated? Is it not? Is it hugely important? But we've been given a bit of a science experiment by Bold Strokes, and I'm going to do my best to deliver. So when you're talking about the crisis moment, it's essentially when one main character realizes that all hope is lost, that they are not going to be able to achieve this goal that they so desperately thought they might be able to achieve, that they desperately wanted. In our case, because we're romance writers, that goal being the relationship, the happily ever after, the we are meant to be. And so when the crisis moment hits, it's that feeling of hopelessness, and it can bounce the story in a lot of different directions. But I thought, let's take it apart a little bit and talk about it. And probably every reader has a different opinion of what makes a good crisis moment. And we are all readers as well as writers. So Aurora, I'm going to go to you first and ask, from your perspective, what's one ingredient of a truly powerful crisis moment?
I thought you were just going to ask me the question, and I was going to say, yes, they're overrated.
And the panel's over.
Shortest panel ever.
Bye.
No, I think I think you really hit the nail on the head with that sense of hopelessness, or that sort of really deep in your gut feeling that it's just not going to work. And I think one of the things I've learned as someone who tends to write and enjoy reading things that are a little fluffier and frothier. I don't like a whole lot of drama. Sorry, Allie. That it doesn't have to be like a big explosive fight. It just has to be that feeling. And you can get at it a whole bunch of ways. I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but feeling of hopelessness.
Feeling of hopelessness. All right. Like 5 people like, that was mine.
For sure.
Because that does come to the top of the list, but we'll see if anyone has anything that they would like to add. Kris, any other ingredients that you're like, no, we got to have that for the crisis moment?
I feel like there's got to be some sort of miscommunication on some level, whether words are said incorrectly or they're heard incorrectly. I feel like miscommunication is part of the whole crisis moment. But for sure, hopelessness was my answer. That was have it written here, hopelessness.
I had a feeling a lot of people might have. Nan, any ingredient that is particular to you that you got to have?
Well, as far as miscommunication goes, I agree that it's often there, but I don't think it's necessary. One thing that I do think is necessary for the crisis moment is change. There has to be change, something that can't be walked back or undone. The story as we know it has to be different after the crisis moment. And it doesn't mean that the characters can't come back to happiness, of course. But it's kind of like that, like a vase that you knock off the table, right? It breaks and you can glue it back together, but you're always going to see where those break points happened. So yes, we can get back to the whole vase, but we will see that change has happened to it.
That is a great analogy. I have never thought about it that way. Those cracks will always exist, and that vase will never be the same again. Huh. Very thoughtful. I like that answer quite a bit.
Thank you.
And now, Krystina, I'm going to make you go after it.
Well, I was just thinking how depressing that was, Nan, because if you have this vase, so nice and pretty, and it's sitting on your shelf, and now it's just ruined because it has cracks in it. I'm like, shit.
Not quite ruined. Different. Changed.
Maybe
The
we
water
like
leaks.
maybe we can melt it down and like go back to the clay and then rebuild it and refire it.
More beautiful than ever.
I would agree with you. I like the communication because sometimes there is a miscommunication and sometimes there is good communication and there's just two very fundamentally like points of view that you just can't reconcile. So I kind of agree with communication and miscommunication because both can be there. My favorite crisis moments, though, involve like a lot of emotions. So, like the physical sensations I want to be described, like how are you feeling, like in your chest, in your stomach, in your limbs? Like, what does your skin feel like? What do you, I don't know, the things that people are actually feeling in those moments to me make the critical moment or the crisis moment really powerful.
Ooh, that's a good one too. Those little details that can kind of jump off the page at you. I like that. Ursula, your turn. Anything to add to those ingredient lists?
Well, I've been thinking, so I'm like, these are all great answers.
Right.
I think a big element is like self-doubt on the part of the characters. I think that whenever there's a new relationship, I think about just like in reality, right? Whenever there's a new relationship, there is a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of second guessing, like, I'm all in, but is this other person all in? Or am I all in? Am I making the right decision? Is this the right person? Is this the forever person? And sometimes that self-doubt is linked to some kind of other relationship trauma in someone's life, whether it's family relationships or previous romantic relationships. And so like I'm really like plot focused and I love like external conflict, and my editors are always like, no, there has to be internal conflict. And then it has to be internally resolved by the character. Like there can be an event that triggers it, but then the reader has to see how this person works through their issue. And so just based on what my editors say, I would say all those emotions that Krystina was talking about, and some kind of, like self-doubt has to be worked through. I think that's a big part of it.
I think it's an important ingredient for sure. Now, Allie, we might have taken a lot of options off the table, but do you have any others?
I think sometimes too it could be like Kris said, it's what somebody says, but sometimes it's a especially if you're a series writer, and in your series cases, it's like you take some of the same characters, but like new characters take. But in the Devil series, Cain and Emma are always kind of front and center. But I think sometimes too it's an action. So I was just thinking of kind of in the books, it's Cain is jogging along and sees a black-headed child in the middle of Wisconsin and knows immediately that, Emma has done the unthinkable, and that she has hidden not some secret, not, that she's turned her into the cops or anything, because she already knew that, but she's hidden a child from her. So that is an internal conflict, because it's
Secret
like,
baby.
yeah, I mean, hiding a baby. So sometimes it's challenging because you write it and it sounds great, and then it's like, okay, everybody hates this woman now. So how do we, turn the page on that? And then Emma, in the same sense, it's like she sees her, and she knows that she knows. And at that moment, both of them internally know there's no turning back. There's no forgiveness for something that, especially, it's not like a baby, it's a toddler. So it's, so that's an internal conflict that Emma has lived with. Cain has no sense of until that exact moment. So sometimes it's just a challenge when you write some internal conflict of how the hell do you write yourself out of that conflict?
Right.
So
It
it
is not
takes
too
more
far.
than one book. That, and then, you have to sometimes be brave and end a book that doesn't end in a happily ever after.
Breaking rules. We need to have on that. But good man, that book, I gotta say, with that secret baby, that book really got me. If you guys have it's Devil Inside, right? That's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fantastic book to check out. Speaking of children, I am talking to you through these little AirPods, and that's my microphone. So I don't know what you can hear, but if you hear some Tarzan like yelling that I'm hearing, it's okay. It's just my children having, I don't even know, but if you hear Tarzan, don't worry. It's just children. I'm gonna press on and pretend like I don't hear them, and it'll all be fine. No, we do have a question that's popped into the Q&A box, and so I'm gonna grab that next. It's from Ann Hart. It says, "How do you keep a crisis moment real? As a reader, sometimes the drama seems manufactured." Yeah, I think that is a difficult line to walk. And so, from your own experience, how do you make sure that it feels authentic? What techniques do you use, or what goals do you have going into it for authenticity? Nan, I'll go to you first.
I'm a reader of romance too, and there are occasions I think that where sometimes readers are like, wow, if they just opened their mouths and had a conversation, this would not be a problem. I've heard that before. And so one thing that I try to do in my novels is have them communicate. I don't want that to be the reason that they are not that the crisis moment occurs. I think that it's hard for people to communicate in real life. We were talking about this in the panel that I was doing yesterday. Communication is really, really hard. And I can see why it is often used, because people don't talk to each other, and it's hard for them to do it sometimes. But I would like my characters to at least try to work towards some kind of understanding and not have that be something that is the main crux of the crisis moment.
I heard once someone say communication is sexy, and that's always kind of resonated with me as I pocket it a little bit. Ursula, what about you? Any ways you keep it authentic for your readers?
I think it has to be true to the characters that you've created, right? So in Enchanted Autumn, I have probably like a kind of classic like crisis moment where Elizabeth realizes that Hazel is a witch, and this challenges everything that she's ever known, and she's not a believer, and she kind of storms out. And this is in character with like her kind of being a very tightly wound person who's had some bad experiences with people kind of like making fun of her for studying the witch trials and things like that. So it's like in keeping with that character, right? So in Winter's Spell, like the crisis moment is much more toned down. And again, I think it makes sense because it's more along the lines of like maybe like a miscommunication. And again, like that's something that happens at the start of relationships when you're still kind of finding your footing. And these characters have a much longer history together in Winter's Spell. And then there's also like the mermaid, Mo, who adds a bit of comedy in bringing them back together after the crisis moment. And I feel like that was more in keeping with Roxy and Tessa's characters in Winter's Spell, where there's a lot of self-doubt, but maybe less angst. So I feel like if it comes from like, if it's in line with the characterization that you've already built up, then it's going to make sense. I think when it doesn't make sense, when it's jarring, is when it seems to come out of nowhere, or it's something very extreme when the characters haven't really given you any sense that that's an issue.
Yeah, big leap, in other words. Allie, I'll toss the question to you next.
Yeah, I think in this case, it's like one of the, not to, when you write something and then you send it in for editing, and sometimes getting a second perspective in that you've written something and they're like, yeah, no.
It's not it. Yeah.
Like, you can't kill off one of the main characters. Kidding. No, I think it's always good to see in that, not that you've manufactured, fake drama just to move the book along, but that sometimes you need to build on that drama. Have you thought of this? So sometimes in the editing process, you kind of take a different look at it and just see that you could have maybe expanded on it. But most of the time, it just has to do with miscommunication. I think that's all it is that like in this last book of Rivals for Love, where one leaves because she's trying to protect the family business of her love interest for a very long time, and then comes back, and that same love interest is now engaged to her brother. So it's there's a lot of miscommunication there.
You think?
But in some, like I said, in that book, when I wrote it, I did write it, and then it's sometimes to go back and add to it, because there is internal conflict, there's external conflict, but sometimes you kind of have to add on that, and it does make it more authentic.
There you go. Aurora, I'm going to come to you next.
I think for me, it's making sure that both characters have their own individual sort of growth arcs, and that they're healing wounds or learning things about themselves or becoming the version of themselves that they were maybe afraid to become. And that it's that sort of tension and that sort of turning point within themselves that influences the relationship as much as anything else. So that things that maybe one character thought about their life, they're working through their own sort of arc in which they realize that that's not the life they want for themselves, but the relationship was founded on a different premise, or on kind of a previous version of themselves. So I think that's where you can get some authenticity, when you have characters that need to do some kind of growing and figuring out on their own. That inherently brings tension to the relationship, even if the relationship seems to have been going along kind of nicely.
That is an interesting component. I like that, the person that they're meant to become. I like that phrase right there. Very, very well said. And I'll go to Kris next.
I think a lot of the panelists here have covered it, but I will say I do write in first person, so I'm kind of with Ursula. I believe that for the authenticity, it has to stay within your character's behavior throughout the book. You can't have something willy-nilly or something so off the wall that it's not believable for the readers. And I love that in first person, you're there with the character as they are progressing through the book, as they're like seeing their love interest for the first time, as they're having an argument for the first time, and you see their reaction, and it's not right, or it's, oh, just communicate this or just say that or do this, but you can't. You're on their journey with them. It's just, you're just kind of right beside them, but you can't really help them. So it has to feel real, like they're really changing through the whole crisis moment and throughout the whole book.
I don't know why they don't listen to us when we're
I
reading.
know.
Why don't they just take our advice? Everything would be fine. Right,
Yeah,
Krystina?
It would be so much easier, yes, if the characters would just listen to us as readers, even actually as writers. But if they listen to us as writers when we're not throwing roadblocks up, the book would probably be a children's book with approximately 12 pages. I feel like everybody covered this incredibly well.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would add, and maybe just extrapolate upon kind of what Ursula and Allie and Kris were all saying, that I like it when the groundwork has been laid kind of throughout the book, so the reader basically knows what the conflict is going to be, or they have an idea of what the conflict is going to be. Sometimes it might get flipped on its head, depending on the circumstances, but having kind of that like groundwork laid that you can kind of build upon like every step of the way. And like, maybe it's something that just the one main character didn't tell the other character in the very beginning, and now it's become this big lie. It's not really a miscommunication. It just is something that they never meant to happen, but it continues to kind of grow from there. And every step you take, the lie gets kind of bigger and bigger. So I really enjoy reading that when I'm on the reading side of things.
Yeah. I noticed nobody said read out loud. Does anybody ever read it out loud to see if it rings true, if it sounds, yeah? Yeah, I noticed, Allie, you raised your hand. That's a technique, right?
No, I think it's always good to read anything out loud, just not the conflict, but the whole book. Because sometimes you find dialogue is a lot better when you say it out loud, because it doesn't sound natural in conversation when you do read it out loud, and you end up changing it. So I do a lot of self-editing while I read every book out loud, which makes me look crazy at Starbucks.
You read the whole book. Wow.
Yeah.
No, I think that can be helpful. I think sometimes hearing it can draw an arrow sign over something that might feel inauthentic. But all very interesting answers. I don't think we have any. Oh, we do maybe have a question. JP says the crisis moment usually comes around the 80% point. Have anybody on the panel brought the crisis point much earlier in the story? Has anybody kind of deviated from it? Sometimes you see that at the 3/4 mark or the 80% mark. Have you ever gone earlier? Nan, go ahead.
For like they do in the movies, the crisis moment happens probably halfway through the second act, or maybe almost at the end. No, it happens about the 50% mark. And it has to happen because the road back to the put together Rays again is taking a little longer in this book. So I think that it works. I like that it comes a little earlier because it gives my characters time to work on themselves and to figure things out for themselves as they come back together. It's different for this one a little bit.
Yeah. Is anyone else had any experience with that they want to know?
Yeah, I think in the inheritance, I put in, I think the conflict came probably in the first fourth of the book. And the one character, I mean, she kind of blows up the relationship just because you scream at somebody and tell them to drop dead. It's not very romantic, but the other character though has an internal conflict because she's trying to impose her values and her beliefs onto her sister, who's having an affair with someone who ends up being the brother of the person that she ends up falling for. So she brings that into the relationship, blows up with the other one. And then, so now you have to work through, because the other one's going like, first you thought she was just crazy. And then then you just start to really dislike this person. So from there, it kind of builds, and then you kind of have to work through that. When you end up inheriting a baby, it kind of helps, you have to really work through those internal conflicts.
For sure. Now, Kris, I saw your hand go up, but do you have experience?
Actually, my latest book, Dreamer, the conflict is about the 25% mark. And so the rest of the book is self-reflection and trying to figure out how to make this relationship work.
Got it. Everyone, beautiful cover on that one, by the way. I'm excited for it. Now, many of you talked about base repair time. That's now our shorthand. Thank you, Nan. And one of the questions that I have that I'm going to jump to just because it's relevant is, do the characters need to spend time apart after the crisis moment? Is that an always, or can they work it out together? Thoughts on that, Krystina Rivers?
I think it feels more authentic to me if they spend some time apart, because I think you have to kind of, everything is like building to that moment, right? And then things kind of explode, they fall apart, and everybody needs time to think. Like, you need to have internal reflection time so that you can have that aha moment where, like, you realize exactly what it is that you're doing wrong, and how maybe you haven't been your authentic self, or how maybe you've been too self-centered and haven't been giving the other main character what they need. And I don't think that you necessarily see that if they are like together, like if there's a conflict and then they resolve it and then all of a sudden they're happily ever after. I don't know. I could be wrong. I can't think of any books that I've read that they didn't have time apart and it felt authentic.
There is no wrong answer here on our science experiment. Good answer indeed. Ursula, what are your thoughts on the topic?
I mean, I kind of agree with Krystina. Like, in books, it seems like there has to be this kind of like moment to step away and reflect. And I mean, I think that it does make sense. It does make sense. But in reality, like, a lot of us are really codependent. And so speaking from my very limited but successful relationship experience, like, I don't know. We never go to bed angry, and we always work it out. In fact, I don't think I could go to sleep if my wife and I were still in a disagreement of some kind. But on the other hand, I think there is authenticity in the sense that, like, even if you make up like right away, there's still a part of you that's processing it, right? And you're going to feel differently about the conflict in 3 days or in a week or in a month, or several years later, than you did right in that moment where you were just like, let's make up right now because I'm so upset. So I think it's true that there is some authenticity to that, like making the characters wait to work it out. But I feel like in a novel, it would be hard to like do what we do in reality, which is like just to kind of like kiss and make up and then keep reflecting on it, right? How we tell stories. So, but maybe there is a way to do it. I don't know. Maybe my next book I'll have to think about.
There you go. Aurora, have you had any experience? Have you ever kept them together after the crisis moment, or what's your thoughts on it?
It's funny because I was thinking about kind of how real life works, and when you have a partner, especially if you live together, right? Sometimes you take time apart that's not physically apart. You just sort of, there's emotional distance. And I think in books, the physical time apart is just kind of the shorthand we use for that, to signify the processing and the growth that has to happen, but also to make the crisis moment feel legitimate. If it was such a crisis moment that there's genuine doubt that they can work through it and sort of end up together, if there's no fallout from that, then that's where I think you run into the inauthenticity issues.
Yeah. Kris?
I think time apart is important. I'm sure I've written a book or two where distance was the problem, so that's really not that's not one I can use. But I feel like self-reflection, you have to get away from people, and I think you have to get away even from people like your family and your friends. I mean, it's nice to have support, but also you don't want your friends to say, oh, she's horrible, we never liked her, she's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And then you get back together, and then like, how do you bridge that? So, that's a tough one. Yeah, because that happens, because your friends want to support you, like, she's horrible, like, worst thing ever that happened, I can't believe you dated her. And I'm kind of writing about that now, and I have to be careful because they are going to get back together, and so then you have the whole there's that whole break in another relationship. And I really don't want to mend every single relationship just because somebody said a bad thing about this person. But it's the truth. I mean, your friends stand by you for anything. You know, they'll say whatever to make you feel good. And I don't know that that's really going to help the character grow.
Good point. Good point. I've actually lived that experience myself where you trash the other person.
I think we
all
all
get back together. This is the worst. I've learned that lesson. I'm not doing that ever again. All right, Allie, anything to add to this portion of the discussion about sending them apart?
No, I guess if it's like real life, you just have a partner that says, get over it. Move on.
All right, fair enough.
Very conflict free, and then the book would just be about like writing grocery lists. Yeah, no, I think it is important kind of to, because I think sometimes if it's an internal conflict, you have to figure out what's best for that one character, how to work through it so that you can forgive. I mean, like I said, I was able to write myself out of that box. So see, 8 books later, they do make up. So it's something that, but you build on it, but sometimes you fall back into that, not so much the internal conflict on your end, but the guilt of if you're the one who was at fault, and how do you work through that to make your relationship stronger if you're still feeling guilt over whatever the hell you did. So I think sometimes self-reflection is a good thing.
Yeah, separate corner, self-reflection for sure. And Nan, I left you for the end. Anything to add?
How can I miss you if you don't go away?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, you know, time apart is really useful after that crisis moment. But, you know, as a contrarian, one of my books, they didn't separate, and it was awkward and it was kind of awful and not fun for a while, but it also kind of forced them to get to the place that they needed to be.
Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder too about books with forced proximity where they can't physically go away from each other. Maybe it's an emotional separation where they're in the same space, but they're really not together. So much interesting stuff there. We do have another question. What about external conflicts versus internal, where something happens to the characters that they have to deal with versus a conflict between the two main characters? Do any of you use that as a tool, I guess, in the crisis moment? Does anybody want to grab that? Or Nan?
I think that external conflict can definitely be a part of the into the crisis moment, but there has to be some kind of internal aspect to it. There has to be at least one character who is making a choice based on emotion, usually, and that emotion is usually fear. So at least in my case, I can't speak for everybody, but external stuff is going to probably be a component, but the internal 100%, in my opinion, has to be there.
All right, good. And Aurora, I saw your hand go up as well. Anything to add?
No. Nan said all the good stuff.
All right. Yes, Ursula, go ahead.
Well, I think in both of my books, I have an external person who helps the characters get past the crisis moments. But I've worked really hard and been pushing with my editors to make sure that that isn't the only thing that causes the resolution, right? So in my first book, it was really like my initial draft had basically Hazel's vampire ex-girlfriend say if you don't go back and get her, then I'm gonna go and get her, right? And my editor was like, nah, can't make the entire resolution based on an external third party. It has to come from within that character. So then I was like, okay, so then she's still gonna go home and think about it. So yeah. So it's part of the writing journey. It's part of perfecting your craft. To be thinking about those kinds of internal struggles. And I pay attention to that a lot more now as a reader, right? When I'm reading as a writer, I'll notice well, here's the plot, but then here's this arc of growth, and the conflict and its resolution have to be part of that part.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I like to separate my characters. Sorry, Krystina.
No, we'll get to everybody. It's okay.
A lot of times I'll use external conflict just because the characters live so far away, and I think that happens in real life in our society, in our queer community. We can't find the perfect mate 2 houses down from us, Sometimes people have to go on Tinder, her, or whatever, sites they have. And maybe you find somebody who lives up in Nebraska, that's just like perfect for you and everything is perfect. And then you have to decide, what do we do? How do we further this relationship? Do you just like let it go, or do you keep a long distance thing going? At some point you have to decide, is it worth it? And then your internal conflict of like, what am I willing to give up for this person? Do I love them enough to quit my CEO job of like this perfect company, to go live in Nebraska, and like field some corn? I mean, you have to decide what that is. And so I kind of like that. I do like the distance thing, because sometimes distance doesn't make the heart grow fonder. Sometimes distance forces you to make decisions about your life, whether, this person is worth it or not. So I do like that conflict. I think that does both external and internal conflicts.
I don't think I love anyone enough to quit my perfect CEO job.
Well,
sorry.
Come on. I thought we had something.
Not for Nebraska.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. No, the snow would be the external conflict.
That's true.
Enter the snow.
I'm not doing that.
The snow.
Nope.
But I think sometimes like what seems to be a really good thing actually becomes the external conflict that drives the internal conflict, right? Like what feels like an opportunity for one of the characters creates the internal conflict of what do I choose, or how do I do it? Or if I choose this thing that's really great for me, it will really suck for you. And I think that forces the characters to really evaluate their life choices. And I think you do it successfully when it's not the sacrifice, right? You actually craft your characters in a way in the magical world of fiction that we get to create, that the choices are actually, they didn't seem like the right choices for them, but it turns out that the choice that keeps them together actually fulfills them individually too.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, it sounds like we have a bit of a consensus that the internal and external can work together in varying degrees. It just depends on the book and the arc and the story, how much and what those percentages come out to be, which is interesting to think about, the behind the scenes of it all. Now we are running a little short on time. I'm going to get to this question. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and talk about the payoff in a romance novel, since we all write romance novels, is really what keeps the reader turning the pages, right? We want to get to that payoff section. And I would like to talk about how the crisis moment influences the payoff, and whether it does or not. What do you think, Allie?
Well, I think in this, we go back to the inheritance. It's like, so the one character who used her own moral compass, or feminism, I guess, in that her sister was the other woman, and she blows up a really good relationship with the sister of the guy her sister was having an affair with. That in the end, though, you find that this person actually is perfect for you. And then how do you get back there? It's like I said, and then you scream at somebody in the middle of a business office. It's not a great thing. But in the end, it makes the relationship stronger, because you have to sit there and realize, I'm stuck with this person for the foreseeable future. There's a child involved, but even without that kid, that this person, shares family values that I have, shares what I want in life, and kind of a same career path. So you don't have to move to Nebraska. You can both stay in New Orleans and enjoy the food and the temperature. Does not get cold very, very often. But I think when you kind of work through that internal conflict, and she's alone doing it. She had her sister who was her sounding board. The sister dies. So then you have to face it alone, and you have to come to the conclusion, do I go forward, admitting that I was wrong and be happy for forever, this will be my happily ever after, or do I continue to hold that anger and not be happy? So I think in some cases it does pay off for that happily ever after, once they work through it and they see what could be. Kind of the same thing with Emma. I mean, you have the external where like I said, I always said that, I mean, you really shouldn't be rooting for Cain. Everybody does. I do. I love Cain.
Yeah.
But, you have to come, Emma is from Wisconsin. I guess it snows there a lot. And her dad was a farmer. And, you know, she didn't grow up in that. You don't grow up in the mob.
Yeah.
You know, she married into it. So in the end, do you accept the kind of little bit of psychotic part of Kane to be happy? Because she is, even though she does kill people, only the people who deserve it, but her family values are the strongest that she's ever found in anyone. So
there you go. There you go. Aurora, I'll come to you next in terms of how does the crisis moment go hand in hand with the payoff, if it does?
Yeah, because I think it makes the reunion, if you will, all the more satisfying. But again, to go back to that idea that the crisis moment also forces the characters to step outside their fear to become the version of themselves that they've been afraid of, or that they think was possible. You get the double payoff. I tend to write a lot of homecoming stories, and a lot of times folks are coming home kind of because their life imploded. And so it's a very reluctant thing. A lot of characters are, you know, kind of expecting to do their thing and then hopefully move on again. And the ability to help them sort of rediscover home on their own terms is, as for me, as satisfying as the happily ever after for the couple. And so I think you need that crisis moment to get both sides of the payoff to work.
All right. Good. Nan, what are your thoughts?
I think like when your story is leading up to that crisis moment, there may be like this kind of inevitability about it. Like, the reader could be like, oh, I could see this coming. Hopefully it makes sense. But then after it, I think, you know, we're putting this huge obstacle in the path of our characters, and them coming back together should foster, I think, this sense of real satisfaction, right? That's what we want our readers to feel. So the fact that the obstacle is the thing that leads to the satisfaction, to me, it makes perfect sense that, you know, the crisis moment is going to have the hugest impact on our payoff.
We want that vase to be pretty in the end when we put it back together. Ursula, how do you think the relationship operates between crisis and payoff?
I mean, I think you're doing it for your readers, right? Because you're getting, it's not just about the emotions of the characters, but it's also about the emotions of the readers. And I know that when I, as a reader, have read a really powerful crisis moment followed by a really heartwarming, you know, explosive or really hot, like coming back together. I mean, it's just like so powerful, right? As a reader, like it has
the best
emotions. You know, I'm a crier, so I'll always cry. So I think that's kind of that, like, that's what you want as a writer, right? You're putting in that conflict there because I mean, it's true. It's always part of relationships and negotiating things, right? But I think, you know, in novels, it's true. We do have to exaggerate a little bit because, again, it's that fantasy element, right? The stronger the crisis, then the more amazing the union.
Oh, nice. I like that final sentence. That's perfectly put. Kris, anything to add to the topic?
It's like when you knock a vase off and it breaks into, you know, lots of pieces and you put it back together. I think, you know, we have an obligation, like you're jumping into somebody's life and you don't know anything about them. You don't know their past. You don't really know anything. You're jumping in and you're on this journey with the characters. And so the payoff has to be better than, like, you have to grow with the character as you're reading it. So the love grows. You want to see them together. You're desperate to see them together. This is a love story, damn it. And you need to get to it. And you just need to feel that while you are reading the story. And the payoff is there at the end. Hopefully it works. Everybody loves it. You know, you want to like put down the book and say, oh my God, that was great. You know, I love this book. I love the characters, you know, so you just want to kind of build them back better than they were or at least how you thought or how the reader perceives that character to be, you build them back better.
Yeah, well said. Better deliver. If you're going to break our hearts, you better deliver that
That's
payoff.
right. That's
I think
right.
you
I
said,
want
damn it,
tears.
too. Damn it was good. Krystina, we are short on time. And what is your final thoughts on the relationship between the two?
I would say first, don't forget the epilogue because that is super critical.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
a
kind of got
payoff.
nailed in some reviews because I wrote a book that was a little bit long and then I didn't have an epilogue. And like part of An Atlas to Forever was those characters' epilogue too.
No.
But I would also say that it needs to be proportional, right? Like I like there to be more angst in a story, but I think kind of the level of angst that you have throughout the entire story needs to be proportionate to the level of the crisis moment and how intense it is. Because I think like if your emotions are a lot higher the entire time, you kind of need that to balance it out at the end. Whereas if it's a lower angst through the whole thing, and then you have some crazy crisis moment, I don't think that feels quite natural.
Yeah, not authentic. That's a good point too. Everything has to be in good measure, right? And check out. I had so many more questions that we didn't get to because it is a fascinating topic. Really, I found that out more and more the more we've talked. But I want to thank my panelists, and I would like to remind our audience that we have so many more panels and readings coming up, not just today, but tomorrow and next weekend. There's a fantastic sale going on if you want to check out the 2023 titles on the Bold Strokes website. But please come back and join us for more. And thank you all for a fantastic discussion here today. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.